Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Chillin with the Villain. I'm your host, the one true villain, Marty Skull, and joining me today, as always, is the producer of the show, Mr. Samuel Scott. And today we're doing something a little bit different. People that listen to the podcast all the time may remember that a few months ago we did a Ask Marty Anything episode, essentially a Q&A, and today we're bringing it back, but we've titled it different. Rather than Ask Marty Anything, we're saying, I guess, question and answer, Q&A, because last time we did this, we kind of were hoping to get more general wrestling questions. Obviously, this is a classic wrestling podcast, and with the title being Ask Marty Anything, typically we got a lot of questions directed at me, and a lot of the stuff is also things I've kind of answered before, and I kind of wanted more questions along the lines of, oh, what did you think of, I don't know, Crush Holly's hardcore title reign, along those lines. So we've put it out there as Q&A, and we've been asking for questions all week on social media. We asked for them on YouTube, we asked for them on Instagram, and also email, and I believe we have a lot of questions. Is that right, Sam?
We have many questions because we opened up an extra avenue this time, mailbag, which we forgot, which, by the way, we've always had that email address, even for the Ask Marty Anything.
Well, we're learning.
It's one of the first things I put up. Yeah, exactly. We're learning, but we have that avenue open now. So we will dive into there as well. Hopefully we'll have some. So we have plenty to go on. This is going to be good. And this is, like you said, this is not uncharted waters for us. We did the Ask Marty Anything episode, but it does feel good to kind of break it up every now and again with a kind of special, what's the term? A special format. So I'm very much looking forward to doing this Q&A, not AMA anymore. Q&A.
I will say this, we did get a lot of questions, and obviously we only have so long on the podcast, so we can't read out everything. So if we miss your question, we do apologize. I'm sure maybe at some point it will get read. Also, if you've asked questions, like I definitely know you told me that there was quite a few questions that we'd actually answered in the last Q&A, so we won't answer them again, but we'll try and get through the most that we can and have a bloody good time whilst doing it.
Yes, sir.
And you know what, Sam? Do you know what really boils my piss?
Oh, apart from everything.
Apart from everything. Yeah. Do you know what really, really boils my piss? So
go on.
I saw quite a few times on social media, I want to say through a reel or a TikTok or something, people going to McDonald's and asking for a double cheeseburger, but ask for it like a Big Mac, which essentially they'll then, because a typical double cheeseburger from McDonald's, I think has, ketchup in it and pickles and onions. But if you ask for it like a Big Mac, they replace that with the Big Mac sauce and lettuce. And that's pretty much it in a Big Mac, right?
The Big Mac also, like a club sandwich, has another layer of bun in between.
So when you get the double cheeseburger, it's basically exactly the same as a Big Mac, but without the middle bun.
Right.
But people were saying, oh, this is so great because a double cheeseburger costs whatever it is, $2, maybe less, but a Big Mac is $5, whatever it is. So I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. And I do like Big Macs, even though they could be quite messy. So I went through the McDonald's drive-thru the other day. I try not to go too often, but I was very hungry and I was on the road, and I asked for my double cheeseburger, Big Mac style, and they did it fine, but they added 40 cents on for the sauce, for the Big Mac sauce, and 25 cents on for the shredded lettuce, right? So one of two things has happened here. Either people are lying with these reels, just being like, oh, it's so much cheaper to get a Big Mac this way, and they're not telling us that actually, no, you're paying extra for it anyway, or this has become kind of a phenomenon, and McDonald's have been getting loads of people asking them to do this, and they've decided to start charging for the Big Mac sauce and the shredded lettuce. Because when she told me that, or she didn't tell me actually, it just came up on the screen. And I was like, oh, you're charging for the lettuce and the sauce? And she said, yes. And I said, but you're replacing the ketchup and the onions and the pickles. So surely that should be a fair swap, no? She's like, I don't make the rules. And I thought, ugh. So yeah, I don't know. They just really boiled my piss. I just thought, you're replacing them. Can you not just charge the same? It's still a double cheeseburger, just different sauce and lettuce instead of pickles and onions. And I'd assume that shredded lettuce is a lot cheaper than pickles and onions. No? I would have thought so.
The lettuce is basically free.
Right, exactly. It's basically water. But yeah, that did kind of annoy me. So maybe it's just social media putting a fake world out there.
Well, that's a piss boiler. That happens a lot. If you want a McDonald's piss boiler, this is what boils my piss when it comes to McDonald's. Guys, if you know you're going to go to McDonald's, just get the app and order it through the app so you can just turn up and just blitz through the drive-in, like through the drive-through. When I'm always through the app and I'm just ready to go and I just want to blitz. And then when you're stuck behind someone, just taking an inordinate amount of time and then they pay with a card or have to get their cash together, just get it already done in the app. You just have to say a 4-digit code. Let's just get it moving, people. It's fast food.
It's funny.
Anyways.
What was your idea? Because we often moan about, what's the right word?
Everything.
What was your idea for a bonus podcast for our eventual Patreon?
Oh, okay. So when it comes to customer service and being a customer, people in my life kind of accuse me of being a Karen, which I'm absolutely. I think you have as well to a certain degree, and I'm absolutely cool with that, honestly. But I prefer the term consumer advocacy barbarian, and I do complain a lot about simple things that should be simple.
Right.
When it comes to customer service, everything is a nightmare now. I just thought maybe, if people want extra us, I could sound off on consumer advocacy stories all day long. It just comes to second nature to me. So perhaps if we ever do a sister podcast, you just want the personalities, nothing to do with wrestling. We would have probably years of content ready, like already in our backlog, right?
Well, funny enough, early on in the podcast, I remember we spoke a lot about guilt tipping, and a lot of people commented on that, and people were kind of with us. So the idea of a Karen for years has had this negative connotation, and I was right there with people like, oh, Karen. But I want to say, to me, maybe it's just in my head. It feels like customer service has just got really bad since the pandemic. Like the pandemic gave everyone an excuse to just be bad at their jobs these days. And so now it's kind of like pro Karen. Like, yes, we wouldn't have to have Karens if customer service was good. We wouldn't have to have Karens if Peacock didn't charge you and still give you commercials, etc., etc. Do you know what I mean?
Karens are a necessary evil.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I don't think I'd really describe myself as a Karen. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe
I wouldn't.
No,
the tone at which you do it, I don't think is Karen-like.
No.
How I do it, I can see why people call me a Karen. But hey, if you want to hear us with our pro-Karen sentiments, let us know.
Yes,
and also let us know if we're completely off the mark at any point. Maybe do you agree with Marty with his McDonald's fast food hack? Getting upcharged? Is he wrong? Is he right? Am I right for saying you need to just get it moving in the drive-through lane? Let us know.
I don't know.
We're not infallible, are we? We're just mortal.
Well, speaking of customer service, I have been working on a little project, Sam, and it actually does not involve you or the podcast, but for years now, I have helped mentor many wrestlers. And it's not something I've ever really spoke about publicly or advertised. It's just something that I do. And, many of today's superstars, whether in WWE, AEW, TNA, I feel like I've helped a lot. And I'll often get messages from independent wrestlers or just wrestlers as a whole asking me to watch their match and give them feedback and everything else. And I'm always happy to help. And it got me thinking maybe I should start offering an online service where I coach wrestlers, trainee wrestlers, aspiring pro wrestlers online via Zoom. And I think, because obviously wrestling is physical, but I feel like there's only so much you can learn just training in a wrestling ring. I feel like you're going to get so much more from learning the psychological side to wrestling. I feel like that's my best value. I can go in the ring and teach people all this cool technical wrestling stuff and people will love it. But at the same time, a lot of it they're probably never going to use really unless they make that a part of their gimmick. But I feel like where I've helped people sort of massively is from a psychological standpoint, helping them come up with their gimmicks and what they should do and why they do it and all this stuff, from their look to their moveset to all this, to their promos, all this stuff. A lot of times just getting that correct advice and being sort of steered in the right direction is what it takes to get that big break in professional wrestling. Because, there is thousands upon thousands of independent pro wrestlers just praying and wishing for that break one day. And a lot of them, I feel like I could help. Do you know what I mean? And maybe just no one's ever steered them in the right direction. And if I was going to put myself over quickly, I mean, I've been wrestling for 20 years, but it has been at a very high level. And I have, again, I'm blowing smoke at my own ass, but I have drawn money in wrestling. I've made a full-time living out of pro wrestling, and I've never wrestled for the WWE. I've never wrestled for AEW, yet I've managed to make a career for myself. And again, not blowing smoke at my own ass, but become very wealthy from wrestling. And I came up with a character that, I should say this, despite the fact that I'm 5'9" and 190 pounds, I came up with a character that, I mean, you've seen my royalties over the years from Pro Wrestling Tees, a character that connected with the audience and made a lot of money. And now I'm just getting to the point in my life, a point in my career where I want to give back. And honestly, I just really, really enjoy it. I really enjoy getting a wrestler and helping them get to where they need to be and kind of molding them and just suggesting stuff and seeing if it works. And then when it does, it's just, it's the best feeling. I get a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess enjoyment out of it. Do you know what I mean? And it's really.
Do you feel pride in like helping people and watching them succeed? Do you
feel 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yes, absolutely. I don't know what it is, but I just feel like I've always just wanted to help people. But now, so like I could, for example, open a wrestling school, but then people.
It's localized.
Localized, right? So like, only people that live nearby can come. If I offer this online service, anyone in the world can be taught by the villain Marty Scurll. So I think it's a really cool idea. I think when this podcast comes out, it won't be available yet, but eventually the service is going to be available on my Big Cartel website, which is martyscurll.bigcartel.com. And sessions will be available on there. I think we'll probably do an hour session on Zoom, but there'll be multiple, like you can buy packages where maybe we do it for 6 weeks, whatever it might be. But yeah, if there's any wrestlers listening or aspiring pro wrestlers, I would love to help you. So yeah, keep your eye out for it. I'm really, really excited about it.
That's a pretty good idea. And I think this is a little PSA for everybody out there. If you have a skill that's marketable and you have all of that knowledge, like do something with it. Like that's such a good idea. I feel like so many people that I know have like skills and abilities and they just kind of sit on them and they don't share them or monetize them or anything. I just feel like that stuff should be out there. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, man.
Dude, I've got wrestlers that have been wrestling for 20 years in major companies, and they'll text me and call me on the day of the TV and be like, what should I do here? What should I do there? And just, I just feel like it's something that people could get value out of. Yeah. And I love the idea of being able to, I mean, I could tell you hundreds of stories. Mark Davis, who is a part of Aussie Open, who are now in AEW, and they were a part of New Japan for a long time. Again, this is just one piece of advice that I gave to this guy, and it changed his life. And obviously, if I do these sessions, you get a lot more advice than just one piece. But I wrestled him in Australia about 8 years ago, maybe, and had a match with him, and it was really good, really, really good. And I thought he's very talented. And after the match, he was like, have you got any advice for me? And I said, honestly, mate, I said, your wrestling was really good. I said, the problem is that you're stuck in Australia. And I said, it's going to be really difficult for you to get a break whilst you're over here. I said, if I was you, I would pack up your stuff. I know it's not, it's easier said than done. I would pack up your stuff and either go to Europe, the UK, where at the time the scene was super duper hot, or to the States. I said, because the chances of promoters flying someone out from Australia is just very unlikely.
Yeah.
And I just said, you need to get somewhere where the scene is thriving. So he answered and he said, I can't do that because of this. I can't do that because of this. And I said, okay, I totally understand. Just you asked me, what do I need to do? And that's what I was telling you. Anyway, then about 6 months later, I get an email and it's from Mark. And he says, hi, Marty. He said, the piece of advice you gave me, I've been thinking about it every single day for the last 6 months. And I just want to let you know that I'm finally moving to the UK to try and make a go of this. And I said, amazing. And I was like, okay, let me message some promoters, get you booked on some shows. So I messaged a few people, got them booked on a couple of shows. And obviously I'm not going to get them booked on a full tour. I was like, you come over, this is your chance and you make the most of it and, get yourself out there. And he came over and he did. And he ended up working a lot, or I think he even lived with Osprey and he was working for Rev Pro, which then led to him going to Japan with the tag team Aussie Open with Carl Fletcher. And that led them to being signed to AEW, which they're at now. But yeah, again, I didn't really do anything. I'm not taking any credit for him whatsoever. But sometimes, and that seems like an obvious piece of advice, but I think sometimes talents just need that. It's not something, normally it's just like one thing and just makes it click for people and it can just change the whole direction of their career. So yeah, I'm really excited to do this with like a whole host of new talents and everything else.
Just out of curiosities, Santino packed up his stuff with a daughter in tow and moved to Japan, right? Is that like jumping in the deep end? Because I noticed you said to Mark, the UK or US. You didn't mention Japan, and UK was like his stepping stone that got him to Japan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is with moving to Japan, I feel like if you want to work in Japan, then you're going to want to work for like the top company or top companies. And I feel like if you just fly over there and try to get into a company, like for example, I don't think you could just turn up at the New Japan Dojo and be like, can I train?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he could have done that. I suggested US and UK because he's an English speaker. And yeah,
there's no language barrier as well.
Yeah, unless you're really, really into Japanese wrestling, moving to Japan is a really, really big,
very bold move. Yeah,
a very bold. So yeah, I mean, I would recommend that to people as well. I just think I've wrestled in so many countries where the people I get asked so often, what do I need to do to get my break in wrestling? And guys, whether I go to Qatar or go to South Africa, and I kind of have to give the same advice. I kind of say, unfortunately, like you're kind of stuck here. You need to get yourself out. These countries are awesome, but they don't have the wrestling scene. And unless you become super over somehow online and become viral, it's probably unlikely that promoters are going to fly you out from here. So I've said that to many talents, and a lot of them will say, agree and nod their heads and they stay put. But Mark actually went, okay, I'm doing it.
Good for him, man. Yeah.
Good for him. Yeah.
Speaking of trying new things and doing new things, last week's War Games episode, following on from Survivor Series War Games, did super well. So
good.
Yeah. So it does seem like people are really enjoying the more contemporary episodes, actually. So maybe we'll keep doing sprinkle more of those in when we can. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny actually because I put a reel out this week about the War Games. And
super hot.
Yeah, dude, this reel already on Instagram after 2 days had over 1 million views, kind of went viral, and it keeps going up. And it's funny because it was kind of similar to the main eventers wear trunks reel, where I said, he tried to cash in the Money in the Bank. Like, would that turn the match into a 10-way world championship match? Obviously wasn't being serious, just kind of hypothetically asking a question because we're a podcast. And dude, someone quickly said, no, that would not happen because Randy Orton had not entered the match yet. So the match had not officially started. Someone pointed out, which is correct. Dude, legit, just every 2 minutes, the exact same comment, whether it's on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram. Legit on Instagram, hundreds of the exact same comment. I was thinking, do people not read the comments before they reply? Like if I ever reply to something on Instagram, whatnot, I always make sure that what I want to say has not been said already. But clearly most people don't do that because, dude, so many people said that. And I kind of wanted to say to them, okay, well, the match hasn't officially started yet, but what happens then when Randy Orton does come in the ring and it starts and the Money in the Bank match is still going on? What happens then? It's kind of fun to ask. I mean, obviously, none of this is important because it's happened and it's just us kind of being silly and discussing ideas. But yeah, dude, just like the same reply hundreds and hundreds of times.
Someone on YouTube said, guys, you're wasting too much of your time and energy thinking into this. It's just fake. It's just a show. It's like, we're not heart surgeons and there's someone bleeding out and we just can't stop thinking about this. Like, we'll get to it. But did you notice in War Games, the Money in the Bank cash-in? Like, it's a wrestling review podcast and critique, and it's for entertainment. And also, 1 million people were interested in this. Over 1 million people were interested in this in a couple of days. But it just makes you laugh so much because if you boil down like any entertainment, like a podcast, for example, it is just putting too much energy into something that probably doesn't need it. That's the point. That's why people listen to this stuff, to escape things. And it was such a cynical message, but it was just the way it was written made me laugh so much. It's like, yes, I guess we technically are, but that's kind of the point of entertainment, isn't it?
Dude, that's just social media as a whole. I put a clip up on my Instagram recently where I was wrestling and I'm wearing all purple gear, and someone replied, or someone put in the comments, should I say, villains don't wear blue. So I replied, it's purple. And they replied, well, I'm colorblind. So
right.
like it's my fault. I was
like he's got you there. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay. But that's just the how social media is in this day and age, unfortunately.
It was very bold of him as a colorblind person to risk making a comment specifically about color.
Right.
Which, like, hats off to him. He went for it. But crashed and burned on the landing there. Yeah, that is funny. That's a good one. I like that. I like that kind of thing.
Dude, well, speaking of War Games and the Survivor Series, after the War Games, there was a big jump as CM Punk jumped from AEW to WWE, and it's caused quite the stir. I think I read that it's the most social media moment ever in WWE, sort of like over 70 million views across different platforms. So they're rivaling us on social media, WWE right now. They're coming in hot. But it got me thinking, I thought it'd be cool if we counted down the top 5 times wrestlers jumped ship. So Sam, it's time for Marty and Sam's top 5. Top 5 wrestlers who jumped ship. This is very apparent right now because of CM Punk and everything else. Sam, would you want to take it away?
I would like you to go first because I have a crushing feeling that my number 1 will also be your number 1, and I don't want to rob you of the majesty of it. But if you want to risk it, I'll go first.
Okay, I'll go first. That's fine. So I've based my top 5 on just how much impact they had overall, or impact on the industry, impact on the company, or impact on the actual talent themselves. And I assume yours is the same as well, but this is not necessarily my favorite jumps, more so just the ones that I thought had the most impact on the industry. So here goes. Coming in at number 5 from WCW to the WWF, Chris Jericho. Now, I think this is quite an obvious one, and I think the reason why it's impactful is because Jericho, for the longest time, was in WCW, and he was considered a mid-carder, could never break through the mid-card, despite how talented he was, and going to WWF seemed like a big risk for him, considering, WWF at the time was the land of the giants, or whatever they want to call it. And you would think someone like Jericho wouldn't really stand a chance in the sense of being a main eventer or main eventing WrestleMania. But Jericho came over, and it took him a little while, but eventually he got there. And Jericho, there's actually a few other wrestlers in this list that have a similar
trajectory
as Jericho, but Jericho was one of the guys that sort of changed how things work in the WWE and gave the opportunity to smaller guys like myself. So I think that's very important. And I just think most people, especially at the time of like 99, 2000, considered WCW to be less than WWE, WWF. So the fact that a mid-carder could come into the WWF and then become a main eventer is a really, really big deal, I feel. And plus the way that he jumped ship as well with the countdown, I thought was really, really cool. I do think that debut is a little bit romanticized and a bit, people kind of overrate it. The whole countdown thing I thought was really, really cool. And Jericho coming out was really, really cool. But the actual back and forth promo with The Rock, where The Rock's just kind of burying Jericho, and Jericho said it himself in his autobiography, like Jericho's doing these very hokey facials, which if you want to be a top guy, it doesn't work. That's for like a comedy mid-card guy. And he was doing that. And he said he watched it back now and he cringes. So I do think that actual debut was quite overrated, but obviously just Jericho's career from then on just speaks volumes. So, and again, he was probably getting paid pretty well in WCW. So to have that faith to try and jump ship, and I'm sure the guaranteed money in WWF was probably a lot less than he was making in WCW, but he took a bet on himself, and it changed wrestling history, really, just the trajectory for wrestlers in the WWE. So my number 5, Y2J, Chris Jericho, WCW to WWF. My number 4, this is a contemporary one, from AEW to WWE, Cody Rhodes. Now, this was pretty massive because Cody had been out of the WWE, WWF for many, many years. I don't know if you would say, I don't think he really spoke bad about the company, but he definitely poked the bear a lot with WWE, and he didn't have the best time. His later years in WWE, he was very public on how he did not enjoy that time or how he was used with the WWE. And he went to the Indies, went to Ring of Honor, New Japan, and then AEW, and became a superstar and became everything he ever wanted to be. Was one of the hands at starting the rival company AEW, one of the EVPs and the faces of AEW. So for him to leave AEW to go to WWE, that alone is just like a really big deal. I think he was pretty much at least the first big name to leave AEW and go to WWE. Of course, before that, we saw guys leave WWE and go to AEW, but he was the first one to do it the other way. I mean, I think the fact that he was such a big star at AEW and an EVP, him to leave there and go to WWE, that had a lot of impact, and that was big news. And then his return to WWE at WrestleMania was massive, and the reaction he got was insane, and people had not forgotten Cody if they'd not been watching AEW and whatnot. And he's now arguably the biggest babyface in WWE. This jump for him definitely paid off, and I'm sure eventually he's going to get what he's always wanted and become WWE World Champion. I'm also going to do an honorable mention right here, also from AEW to WWE, and that's Jade Cargill. Obviously, not debuted yet, so this is not in my list, but I feel like WWE have already done an amazing job at presenting her like a really big star, and I can only predict that this jump for Jade is going to be beneficial for her. So shout out to Jade Cargill.
For sure.
My number 3, from WCW to the WWF, the Radicalz. Now, for some reason, I feel like when people talk about jumping ship, people a lot of times will think about the Radicalz. And it's funny because plenty of talent had come from WCW to the WWF, and arguably bigger talents than the Radicalz, or bigger names, should I say. But in the similar vein to Chris Jericho, the fact that Eddie Guerrero and Benoit came to the WWF and became main eventers, it just changed the landscape for the WWE, and it obviously opened the doors for guys later on like Daniel Bryan to become main eventers. But not only that, but I feel like both Eddie and Benoit had helped change the style of what WWE put on. It changed the style into what they then went on to, what's the word I'm looking for, kind of go into. Before Eddie and Benoit, obviously there was Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko as well.
Yeah.
But their runs with the WWF didn't really work out. But before Eddie and Benoit, the style was very much like, I don't know, the Road Dogg and more punch, kick, and everything else. And then when guys like Eddie and Benoit, and I'd say Jericho, and then later Kurt Angle, it kind of ended up changing the complete style of the WWE. And again, the fact that this came from sort of WCW mid-carders to then WWE main eventers and changing the whole landscape of the company, I just think that speaks volumes. So, and again, they were getting paid well at WCW. They didn't like how things were turning out and they jumped ship. And they jumped ship not long before WCW closed doors. So they did it at the right time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that seemed to be a big deal to people. And it was one of those things where, again, kind of like Jericho, you wouldn't have thought that WWE would have been interested in them, maybe not, because they wanted big guys. And especially, you know, I love Dean Malenko, but I was surprised that WWE was interested in Dean Malenko. In all honesty, I think the one they were probably most interested in was probably Perry Saturn.
Oh, really?
I think so, yeah, because Saturn, he was a really good worker and he got pretty over in WCW and he just looked the most impressive and his work was really good. Obviously, it didn't really work out for him in the WWE. And I think someone said this on our social media accounts the other day, like, oh, WWE did him dirty. But I think Saturn had a lot of demons and problems with substance abuse. So it's kind of like, what can they do? Do you know what I mean? It's like people are so quick to put it on WWE, but a lot of the times, if a talent isn't working out, 9 times out of 10, it's normally on the talent. If we're being honest, but yeah, the Radicalz jump, and I just thought it was so cool at the time. I remember watching WCW, being fans of these wrestlers, and then seeing them on WWF TV on Raw. I was just like, whoa, this is awesome. So, and the fact, I think the reason why it's in everyone's heads is because there was 4 wrestlers, not 1, not 2. Not even 3, 4 jumped together. That's unprecedented, right? That's never really been done before or since. So my number 3, the Radicalz. My number 2. Now, you could argue this as number 1, but here goes. My number 2, from the AWA to the WWF, Hulk Hogan.
Okay. I've never heard of AEWA. That just shows how...
You've never heard of Vern Gagne, the AWA? It's one of the biggest territories.
Okay.
So Hogan came from the AWA. Lots of wrestlers. It was Vern Gagne's promotion. And it was, for years and years, the big promotions were the New York, WWF, NWA, and AWA. And eventually Vince he took all his talents from the territories and took them from AWA. A bunch of guys he took, like Bobby the Brain Heenan and all sorts from the AWA. Kurt Hennig, but the biggest one obviously was Hogan. Jumped ship from AWA to the WWF, and they strapped the rocket ship to him, and of course, boom,
to the moon.
Who knows what wrestling, like if that jump didn't happen, we don't even know what wrestling would look like right now. Right. It's essentially started sports entertainment. It made Vince win, take over, and monopolize wrestling. And so, yeah, this is the only reason why I put it at number 2 is because back then, wrestlers did jump a lot from territory to territory. That's kind of what they were supposed to do, right? If that makes sense. Like you go to a territory for 6 months, then move on. So that's why it's at number 2. But yeah, if Hogan didn't make that jump, we might not even be doing this podcast right now. So Hulk Hogan at number 2. My number 1.
I know you're number 1.
I mean, it's probably when you say wrestler jump ship, it's what you think of. I'm talking about Just Incredible from ECW to WWE.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's what we all think of when we say wrestlers jump ship. No, let's do it right now. Number 1, from WWF to WCW, my boys Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. And what's funny is it's weird how this is considered such a massive deal, because Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were big stars, but they were big stars in the WWF when it was a down period. Yet them jumping to WCW just boomed, and it sparked the wrestling boom. And obviously that's why it's so important. Like if they didn't jump ship, because you got to remember as well, wrestlers had already left the WWF to go to WCW, and wrestlers had already left WCW to go to WWF. But this one just seemed like such a big deal. And I think it's because the storyline was about them jumping ship as such, or the idea that they were still working for the WWF. And just the whole creation of the NWO, Had this not happened, again, who knows what wrestling would look like in this day and age. I don't think people give Hall and Nash the credit for really kickstarting the Attitude Era. Do you know what I mean? Like, if this didn't happen, the Attitude Era probably would have never happened. So, yeah, you're going to talk about it as well. And I think it's an obvious one. I typically don't like to be obvious in my top fives, but I can't. With this, it's like, who else could be number one?
Right.
Like, if I don't go with this, I'm just not being true to myself. So my number one, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. And you do them as a duo as well. Do you know what I mean? Like,
for sure. Yeah.
You can't say number two, Nash,
Scott Hall,
one,
and then
it's the combined together.
They're a package deal for sure.
Right. I mean, they did technically come in. I think Nash came in, was it 2 weeks after Scott? But still, it was.
I always thought it was together.
No, Scott Hall turned up first and said he was bringing someone else with him, and then the next week or something, Nash turned up. Yeah, so
awesome. Yeah, good list. I really like that. Unlike how you did yours, actually, mine is mainly personal because I don't really have the knowledge of the history to like go back and be like, oh, this one was more impactful. This is just the ones I think feel like most impactful to me. My honorable mention is actually the Radicalz, and the reason why they're just an honorable mention is because I'm viewing them as a package, and Dean Malenko and Perry Saturn didn't really move the needle. So as the Radicalz as a full package, they didn't make the top 5. Number 5, I have, now this is as personal as it can get. I've got Goldust coming back into the WWE after because he just sucked at the WCW, right? But when he came back to WWE, we got our boy back. So
which jump are you talking about? He did it twice, I want to say.
He did?
Or 3 times, maybe.
He did? Wow,
so,
I didn't know that.
I think his first matches, was he in WWF before WCW? He did like a few
he was in WWF before WCW, yes, for sure.
When he teamed up with Dusty in late 88 or 89 or something. Then he was in WCW, yes. Then he left WCW in 95, and that's when he became into Goldust. Is that what you're talking about?
Of course.
But he also went back to WCW in 99, 2000. He went to
After
WCW.
He was Goldust?
Yeah.
Wow.
Have you never seen 7?
7 was post Gold. Oh, don't tell me 7 was their attempt at their own Goldust.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't like Goldust, but it was after Goldust. Yeah, it was like 2000.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And then he went back to WWF in 2002, I want to say. So, but you're talking about the 1995 one, I take it.
I assume so, yeah, because I did, yeah. Whichever one gave me the Goldust that I played with in WWF Attitude.
Okay, yeah, that's 95, yeah.
My number 4, I'm going to do my number 3 first, and it will make sense. So my number 3 is Kurt Angle to TNA. Now, I love Kurt Angle in WWE. I do, and I think he's amazing. But the very little that I did see of TNA, I don't want to be rude to TNA, but I feel like he was almost carrying it. He was just like such a workhorse, and he was always on, and he was always killing it, doing these crazy things. So Kurt Angle to TNA, I don't know the politics or what happened. I don't know if he was unhappy at WWE or something, but he really seemed to just care a lot in TNA, almost like that. No, not quite. I was going to say almost like that figure Cody was in AEW, but it's not quite the same thing. But yeah, he just really seems to care. Really seems to do it. Yeah.
Well, so I think that was a big thing for that's arguably TNA's biggest get.
Yeah,
and that definitely legitimized TNA, and obviously TNA is still going to this day. So if Kurt Angle hadn't jumped, maybe they wouldn't be to
Who
this
knows?
day. So,
yeah,
right. And then TNA obviously has this big place in wrestling history. So yeah, I considered that for my list as well.
Yeah, and obviously I have to bring it back to the games. I'm pretty sure he was on the front cover of Impact the rest of the game.
I would be sure about that. Yeah.
My number 4 is kind of like the other way around. It's AJ Styles to WWE. When was that during a Royal Rumble? Oh, I can't actually remember. My mind's blanking. But
he didn't jump from TNA. He jumped from New Japan to
New Japan. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was the Rumble 2016, maybe 15, 16.
He's one of those people, as a very casual fan, who I've heard of but never really saw, or only saw clips of.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like online. So when he came to WWE, I was like, oh my God, that was a proper, oh my God, because I was actually watching it around that time as well. So for me, that's one that I very clearly remember. Goldust, obviously, I didn't remember because I got it absolutely wrong. Didn't really watch TNA, but the AJ Styles to the WWE was one that I actually remember and witnessed and thought was really awesome.
Yeah, I think that's important because it just seemed like for years AJ would never turn up in the WWE, and then he finally did, and people had fantasized it for so long. So I would definitely say that was a really big jump. Yes.
My number 2 is Chris Jericho to WWE in 1999. You said it's just really impactful. Eventually, everything that I wanted to say, you basically said. So yeah, just Chris Jericho, you made the list. Number 1, well, Scott Hall. Come on, who do you think it is? We've done it. It's Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. When you said, "Hey Sam, let's do wrestlers jumping companies," it's almost like a knee-jerk, like word association game kind of thing. Just immediately, what goes into your head? Like that was the first thing, just went straight into my head. It's Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, almost synonymous with jumping ship and making an impact. So yeah, number 1, easy peasy.
Yeah, it's almost like the guidebook to how to do it.
Yeah, they absolutely killed it. And you're right. Without them, we wouldn't have had NWO. Without them, we wouldn't have had DX or whatever. It's crazy, just the way the wrestling landscape changed for the better because of their move to WCW.
Yeah,
and actually, to be honest, man, I probably wouldn't even be watching WCW if they didn't jump. I think that's kind of what got me over there.
Well, wrestling now. Oh, everyone. Wrestling in like 95 and early 96 the landscape was really not good. Both WCW and WWF pretty much sucked. So it was the much needed injection that the wrestling business needed. So yeah, definitely agree with you there.
Remember that comment that you just said, 1995, WCW and WWF both kind of sucked for the inevitable Q&A, because there's a question that's basically exactly that. So it's really funny that you brought that up.
That's funny. Now, Sam, before we get into everybody's questions, I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about our official sponsor of the podcast, LegacySups.com. Now, for those who don't know, Legacy is ran or owned by the SmackDown general manager, Nick Aldis, and his wife, wrestling legend, Mickie James. So that's a pretty impressive pedigree. Now, Legacy Subs, they've got you completely covered. The supplements that I like, Recovery PM. Now, I've spoke before on this podcast about how important sleep is just in general. Like there's just nothing negative that can come from sleep. It's so good for you in terms of your recovery, for training, for burning fat, just for your overall health, your mindfulness, all this stuff. And Recovery PM is a professional blend of 9 clinically proven natural sleep aids and tranquilizers plus magnesium. So you're going to relax at first, then experience a deep sleep and wake up refreshed and ready to attack the day. I take Recovery PM every single night, so I have enough energy to go to the gym, train hard, go to jiu-jitsu and train hard, sometimes do wrestling training as well. Then I have to jump on this podcast and perform for all of you. And I credit it all to the Recovery PM supplement. But not only that, but poor quality sleep has a significant effect on testosterone levels. A Chicago study found that men who slept 5 hours or less for just 1 week suffered a decrease in testosterone of about 10 to 15%. This is also why the Recovery PM is a part of the Ultimate Test Stack with LegacySups.com. Not only do I take the Recovery PM, but I also take the X-Lean 5 Fat Burner. Experience next level fat loss and definition with the X-Lean 5 Fat Burner supplement. This formula comprises of 5 key thermogenic and lipogenic ingredients to target fat cells, combined with an energy and focus blend. Get the most out of your workouts and take advantage of all the benefits this blend has to offer when combined with a calorie-restricted diet and high-intensity exercise regime. Honestly, if you're doing the work already, I know we're all trying to keep the weight off and it's difficult during the holiday period. Help yourself out. Get yourself over to LegacySups.com. And also, you can save yourself 10% just for being a listener of the Chillin With The Villain podcast. So stop waiting. Level up now at LegacySups.com and use the promo code VILLAIN for 10% discount and support this show at the same time. That's LegacySups.com, LegacySups.com, and level up with legacy.
Okay, very good. Thanks to the sponsor. Thank you, Martin. Now, are you ready to answer some Q&A style questions from
Yes,
multiple sources? Yes, indeed.
let's
Should we?
get to it.
Okay. First question. The real Chris. How did you come up with the villain gimmick? Oh wait, you answered that one, didn't you?
I do have a thing now where, because I get asked that question so much, where I just want to give a different answer every single time.
Add to like the mythology of it. Oh, could it be this or this?
So this is my answer this week. I once held the door open for someone and they walked through it and they didn't say thank you. And that turned me into the bitter villain that I became.
David works with business owners. Asks, do you think the WWE regrets never turning John Cena heel?
It's a good question. I don't think they regret it at all. No, I think a heel run for him would have probably been fun, and it could have made him even bigger, possibly. But dude, I'm pretty sure WWE is pretty content with the success of John Cena and how much money he's made that company. And when John Cena talks about it and he says about, he does the Make-A-Wish stuff and just how that was so important to him, I'm like, yeah, that's way more important than any wrestling storylines or anything else. Do you know what I mean? That he's leaving a lasting impression on people's lives,
real lives. Yeah,
exactly. It's much bigger than wrestling, so I don't think WWE regrets it at all. Even though it would have been fun, I don't think there's any regret there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He's a money maker. Just let him do what he's doing. Awesome. Yes. The Berg 511 asks, which country has the most knowledgeable fans? And then they put no USA flag and no UK flag. But I think answer both, man. Like with the US and UK included and without.
Sorry, ask that again. With the US and okay, gotcha.
He put which country has the most knowledgeable fans, but then like has asked you to exclude the US and UK.
Okay. Probably Japan. I'd say that in Japan they seem to know the backstory of the wrestlers, and I mean, I guess it also depends how you define knowledgeable. I don't really think that's determined by what country you're from, but if I was pushed to give an answer, I would probably say Japan, just because it has such a rich history of pro wrestling, and obviously you think about where wrestling has been really big, obviously the States, obviously Mexico, and obviously Japan. So it's kind of hard to say a different country outside of those.
Yeah.
So, but Japan has such a, like I said, a rich history of pro wrestling. So I'd give the nod to Japan. And I love the fans in Japan. They're just super respectful. They react really, really well. They're not trying to get themselves over. They're not chanting "We want tables" during the matches. I really, really enjoy performing for the Japanese audience, so I'm going to give them the nod.
Awesome. Gotta love Davon asks, do you binge podcasts? And they are, by the way, still on episode 8 of Chillin With The Villain. So they're plugging away. They're getting through it.
Do I wouldn't say I binge podcasts. I listen to podcasts. If I binge anything, it's probably YouTube videos. But even then, I tend not to binge any type of media. I don't think that's really too healthy. I'm not the type of guy that's gonna, even things like Netflix shows, very, very rarely will I sit there and watch 8 Netflix episodes in a row. And I know lots of people do, and I'm not knocking that whatsoever, but with podcasts, no, I would not say I binge them. What about you, Sam?
I put them on to distract myself from something I don't want to do. So if I have some house chores, headphones are going on. Also, when I have a long drive, I'm so looking forward to throwing on the podcast. So I use them almost like a utility tool. So I wouldn't say that I binge either, but I really do look forward to listening to podcasts. And my personal enjoyment of what I get out of podcasts actually kind of made me want to do this with you, because I was like, oh man, like I really get something out of podcasts.
Yeah,
so they really help me in my day.
What's funny is, because I do enjoy listening to podcasts, and it's made it so now that I enjoy doing cardio at the gym, or I enjoy driving, whereas before not so much. Because the thing is with podcasts, there'll be episodes that come out from the podcast that I like, and it's almost like you need a reason to listen to them. So I just don't think you would sit at home, put your headphones in, and just sit there listening to a podcast, right? Like you would a TV show, for example. That seems a little odd to me. I'm sure people do that. And if anyone's doing that right now, then that's awesome. Me personally, I don't really do that. Like you said, I have to kind of be doing something. But yeah, if I've got to do the washing up, I'll crack on a podcast, but mainly driving and cardio at the gym.
Yeah, and there's nothing better, is there, when you've got something you have to do, throwing on a podcast. They really help.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
The Jonas Holm asks, what are you looking for 2024? I think they mean looking forward to.
Okay, what am I looking forward to with 2024?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things. In fact, actually, today, I believe, I wrote down some of my goals for 2024. And I'm obviously not going to give them all away on here, but what I'm looking forward to, obviously, wrestling more. I really think year 2024, no spoilers, but I do think you're going to be seeing a lot more of the villain Marty Scurll on television. So certainly looking forward to that. And I'm not confirming that's happening. It's just one of my goals for 2024. Obviously, last few years been pretty tough, but I'm optimistic about 2024. And I'm also optimistic about this podcast. And I'm excited to start a Patreon and really build this community that we've already built, but make it even stronger and even bigger. Really looking forward to that. Like, I know social media numbers is not something you should really get hung up on, but I've made it a goal of mine to get to 100,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel by the end of 2024. So if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, please do that. Please help us out. And maybe if you would be so kind, tell your friends about it and get them to subscribe as well. So I think at the moment we're on about close to 5,000. So by the end of next year, I think we could do it. I just want one of those plaques. That's all I want. Yeah. No, there's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to in 2024. Like I said, things can be tough, but I just have to stay optimistic and positive. And I know that all sounds kind of cliche, but it's a new year. Who knows what can happen?
Yeah, 2024. I'm really looking forward to ripping the tits off of this podcast, man, and taking it to the next level. I was looking on our Buzzsprout statistics, and it hit me that we're not even 6 months old. I thought we were. No, we've done quite a lot. We've achieved a lot in less than half a year. So for the whole of 2024, a whole calendar year on top, I think we can really, really take this to the next level.
What episode number is this?
23.
Okay, so we're getting close to 26, which will be like half a year, which is pretty cool to think about. That's pretty awesome. But that still is not many podcasts. And typically people that start podcasts, because most podcasts, they start and they give up, and they normally give up around the 20 episode mark or that half year mark. So we're surpassing that. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep doing this until we're very, very rich, I assume. So
I thought you could say very, very old.
Well, that as well.
Man, that would be pretty. That would be something if we're still doing this in our 60s. But yeah,
you know me, Sam. I don't do things
half measures. Yeah,
half measures. If I'm doing something, I go all out. So that's definitely the case with the podcast. But yeah, it's just the idea that people enjoy and listen to this podcast. I think a big part of this whole package is the social media aspect and the reels that we put out pretty much daily, because we kind of touched upon it before. Social media can be so toxic and
grueling and negative. And
I think our videos typically are positive. They are interesting, dare I say, funny. And I see a lot of wrestling, like social media, not similar to ours, but people putting out reels, and it's normally moaning about WWE's booking or moaning about AEW's booking. But we're coming out and we're trying to actually give different perspectives. Typically, like I said, very positive spin on things. So hopefully people see these videos and it puts a smile on their face. And knowing that we do that, to me, is really, really cool. And that's what it's all about, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we want to explore other avenues. We've had a few technical setbacks, but we're hoping to do Twitch streaming, like video game streaming next year. And our handle for everything is The Villain Pod. And that was initially because of pod for podcasts, but we very quickly kind of realized, hey, we want to do these other ventures. So pod kind of means more like it's a pod of Chilling with the Villain is just the podcast arm of the Villain pod, right? We want to do Twitch streaming, maybe set up a Discord server to hang out in, all sorts. Like you said, the social media is just another arm of this kind of entertainment venture. That's our kind of idea for this, or scope for it. It's going to be really awesome. So yeah, that's what I'm mainly looking forward to for 2024 is a more creative, using this podcast or the Villain Pod as a creative outlet and seeing what more I can do and we can do for you guys. Chief AJ Whit asks, have you ever forgot your gear and had to borrow someone else's? And this reminds me of that time The Undertaker comes out in these kind of like zebra or snakeskin pants, and he just clearly borrowed them from the Godfather.
Do you know what? I remember that, and you've mentioned that before, but I feel like that, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like that might be a myth. I feel like Undertaker was trying something different, because if he forgot his gear, forgot his pants, is it really that difficult just to find some
plain black
pants or some jeans or something? Because he pretty much, a lot of times he wore denim and stuff anyway. Would it really be that hard for him to, I know he's a big guy, but
yeah,
I would have assumed that being the best choice, that seems weird to me. So I can only assume that it was deliberate, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is the case, but I don't know about that. But one thing I do know about, I don't think I've told this story on the podcast before, but to answer your question, yes, I drove to the airport once, and as I was getting very close to the airport, I quickly realized that I hadn't put my bag in the trunk. So I was like, shit. So I turned around and started driving back home, and I was already really cutting it fine for to make the flight. I was getting there like 50 minutes before the flight or something. So I'm driving back home, and I start looking on the phone to see, when the next flight out. Because I was like, well, I'm going to miss the flight. And I'm looking, and there's just no flights that would get me there in time to do the show. Any flights I could take after this one would get me there after the show.
Right.
So now I'm like, ouch. And I speak to someone at Ring of Honor, and they're like, just get here. That's the most important thing. We need you here. And I'm like, oh man. So then I turn back around and drive to the airport to make the flight, but then I don't have any gear with me at all. Right. And it was really funny. I can't remember where we were, but I was in a 6-man tag, and I want to say Kojima was in it from New Japan, and maybe Nagata as well, who's like one of my favorite wrestlers. And who else was in it? My memory's really terrible, but I went to like not Sports Direct, like a Dick's Sporting Goods, and I got a pair of knee pads and some socks and maybe some ankle supports. Then I got to the show, and the only person that had a pair of boots that would fit me were these white boots, but they were like super short. Typically wrestling boots come up to beneath the knee pad. These were like really short boots. So, but they were the only thing people had that would fit me. So I was like, guess I got to wear these. And then I knew a fan that I'd previously sold some wrestling trunks to, and I knew they were in the area and coming to the show. And so I asked them if they could bring the gear that they'd bought from me so I could borrow it for the show. So I had a pair of Villain trunks, but then I had like weird knee pads and these weird short white boots. And everyone was like, why does Marty look like this? So it was pretty funny. And yeah, I don't think any other time that's happened to me. In fact, a while back in Canada, I left my trunks at the promoter's house, and the match was getting closer and closer. And the only pair of trunks that the promoter could give to me were these pair of like Bret Hart trunks, like just like Bret Hart. And at one point I thought I was going to have to wrestle with these Bret Hart trunks, which I probably secretly would have loved. But then fortunately the promoter's wife got to the show on time to give me my trunks to wrestle in. But one of my favorite matches, I wrestled Chris Hero at York Hall, and the airline had lost his luggage. So he had no wrestling gear, and he had to borrow gear from people. And he had he typically wrestled in trunks, but he had to borrow someone's like black singlet, which I think he wore it with the straps down. But yeah, he just had the makeshift wrestling gear, and he just looked kind of generic. He just had like black leotard, black knee pads, black boots, and ended up having like a really amazing match of me. So that was really cool, because I remember originally when his gear wasn't there, he was like, oh, maybe I'll just wrestle in street clothes and we could do it more like a street fight. And I was thinking, I don't want to do that because this is Chris Hero. He's a great technical wrestler. I'm a great technical wrestler. I want to have a really good match with him. I don't want to do like the street fight, hardcore stuff. So I was like, no, let's get some gear from people. We managed to go around, and I was asking different people, have you got this? You've got that? Have you got size, whatever shoe, boots he is? And put something together and end up having like a classic match. So that's pretty funny. But yeah, touch wood, that's been the only real times that I have forgot my gear.
You know, there's like a legit fear that people have, and they have recurring dreams of being back at school and having to do their PE in their underwear because they forgot their PE kit. That's a real legitimate danger that pro wrestlers could face like every day at their job, right? It's like a legitimate fear that a lot of people have, where it just wouldn't affect them day to day, but it can strike at you guys at any time, especially because you're traveling so much at the mercy of the airlines. It's just pretty funny.
Dude, it's people talk about it before. I've spoken about it before, but the wrestling dream, and I've had it so many times, is your music hits and you're not dressed whatsoever, or like you're trying to put your boots on, but they just won't tie up. And that dream I've had so many times, and I know so many other wrestlers have, and it's so odd. Like, why do we have these dreams? Why does everyone have them? It's so odd, but so many times, like your music's playing and you're just not dressed at all, or you can't find your gear and you're like, oh, and then like your music has been playing now for like 2 rounds, you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, and it's just, and you never get out there, and it's like then you end up waking up. But yeah, it's a very, very odd dream. But it's not like that. What's weird about it is I've had the dream so many times, but I've never actually had that happen to me in real life. So I don't, I've always been ready by the time my music hits. So I don't know why I always have that dream. It's very odd.
The Wrestling Classic asks, if you could bring any wrestler back from the dead to have dinner with, who? I find that very cruel use of necromancy, to bring somebody back from the dead. It's like, no, you have to hang out with me. You don't know me, but you have to hang out with me for dinner.
Well, shout out to Justin at the Wrestling Classic. He's awesome. We like the Wrestling Classic. They're friends of the show, big on Instagram. So if you don't already, go follow the Wrestling Classic on Instagram. This is a good question. Obviously, people that stand out, Eddie Guerrero, just because one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Like I said before on the podcast, Chavo told me that Eddie Guerrero would have liked me. So I'd like to see if that was true. But there's a lot of things I'd like to talk to him about. And I never got the chance to meet him. And that's just a real shame. In the same vein, I would have loved to have met and discussed stuff with Owen Hart. I think big fan of Owen Hart, obviously just a big fan of the Harts in general. And I just think he's just another wrestler. Like, I've met Brett and I've worked with Brett, and I've met pretty much the majority of my favorite wrestlers I've had the chance to at least meet. Owen obviously never got a chance to. And I just think that for whatever reason, I don't know him at all, obviously, but I just feel like we would have got on well. And Bruiser Brody would have been another one. Obviously, I think he might have passed away not long after I was born, so that couldn't have happened. But yeah, there's Brian Pillman is another one. I think it'd been awesome to have a conversation with him. There's a lot of guys. Dusty Rhodes is another one. Never got a chance to meet. So yeah, British Bulldog would have loved to have met. Yeah, I could be here all day.
Yeah, I feel like Andre the Giant would have a lot of stories as well.
If he wanted to tell you,
right? Yeah,
you probably have to get him drunk first.
Yes. Oh my goodness. But what I would use my necromancy token and give it to you, so you could have that talk with Eddie Guerrero that Chavo was saying. So that's what I would do. Dustin Star 1388 asks for our opinion on stables in professional wrestling currently. Are there too many? Not enough? Who's your favorite? We mentioned stables quite a bit on the previous episode, actually, but this is an interesting question.
Yeah, so stables in wrestling, good conversation, good topic. So in New Japan, the way that it always worked, and this is kind of a Japanese thing, and I feel like a lot of fans, more Western fans, didn't really understand this, but they have factions, but they're more so, it's like the roster is divided up into teams. That's kind of how it works. So pretty much everyone is aligned to a team or a stable. But it's not like they're a stable that always comes out, all of them together, if that makes sense. Because people be like, oh, that stable, they've got too many stables or they've got too many people in that stable, but it doesn't really work like that, if that makes sense. It's more so that the roster is kind of divided up into these different teams. And I think that's kind of a nice, it's actually kind of a unique way of doing it. And typically the house shows and the shows will always be built up of multi-man tags and people representing the different teams. Because of course, New Japan, they've got LIJ, Bullet Club, Chaos, they had Suzuki Gun for years, all these different groups. And I always thought that was quite a unique way of doing it. And it makes it easier to book as well, I assume. So, of course, I've been a part of some pretty famous stables, obviously, most notably Bullet Club. And you saw the business that Bullet Club did. Talking about today, I guess the biggest stables now are the Bloodline and the Judgment Day as well. And both of them are kind of, one's ruling Raw, one's ruling SmackDown. So I think that's awesome. And I think because they don't have too many stables, it makes those ones that they do have mean a lot more.
Yeah, stand out.
Yeah, in AEW, I don't really, do they have stables at the moment? I can't really think off the top of my head. They've definitely done a whole bunch of them. Maybe they've kind of filtered that out round about now. But no, I think if it makes sense, I also think people tend to like stables because they like the idea of being part of a group or a gang. That's why the NWO shirt sold so well. That's why the Bullet Club shirt sold so well, or the D-Generation X. People like the idea of being a part of a group. And, back in the day, the Four Horsemen, or one of my favorites, the Heart Foundation. So I'm all for stables. I think stables is really, really cool. But if they're a stable, they have to be impactful, if that makes sense. You can't just put four guys together and just be like, they're a stable and they just kind of wrestle and everything else. The idea is that when they become a stable, they're a force to be reckoned with. And I think with the Bloodline, especially, and Judgment Day, that's very much the case. So I feel like WWE does it very, very well.
Yeah, for sure. Bloodline, love. Judgment Day, I like. Damage Control, I like. That thing you're explaining how they do it in Japan, I really like. I didn't know that. Sounds like almost like cliques in school, like in a school, like different factions, or even the houses in Harry Potter almost. I just kind of interesting way of handling that. That's pretty awesome.
When you were a kid and you had sports day at your school, did you have like the teams like that? Like in our schools, it was divided up into 4 different colors, I want to say, like blue, red, green, and yellow.
Ours was by class.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't mean economic or social class, by the way. I know we lived in the UK. I meant by actual.
That's great.
Oh, dearie me. That shit, Glenn Coco. This, I'm reading the question. This is probably a sock account of you, a burner account. What is the best in your house pay-per-view and or in your house match? Only the old school, not NXT. That's why it sounds like something that you would really want to answer. Only the old school stuff, Marty. None of this NXT in your house nonsense that they're just living off of the name of in your house. We want legit in your house.
Well, it's funny because you say they're living off the name in your house, but typically the in your house pay-per-views weren't very good. So I'm not necessarily spoiled for choice of this. I think if you answer this question, you have to go with the ones that were just called in your house, because later on, it turned into Judgment Day, then in little letters in your house. But I think up to 17, 18, I think 17 was Ground Zero. And then after that, like Bad Blood and stuff, they kind of really started to change the names of the show. So I think that's right. So from there and below, the best in your house, we already covered it on the podcast. Go back and listen to it. Canadian Stampede, for sure, the best in your house. Because like I said, typically the in your houses were really bad, or they would have one good match, normally a Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart match. But the Canadian Stampede show from top to bottom was a really fun and enjoyable show. So that for sure is my best show. And in terms of matches, another match that we spoke about last week, I want to say the best in your house match, probably that Mankind and Shawn Michaels match from In Your House 15, Mind Games. I'm not sure I got the number right there, but yeah, that was an awesome match. What about you, Sam?
Canadian Stampede for sure. When you said, hey, I want to do Canadian Stampede, I've never heard of it. I thought, that sounds like it sucks. Covered it. Like I watched it for the podcast. I watched it for the show. It was really good. I just got so much enjoyment out of that. And that actually makes me want to go back and watch more in your houses, because I actually haven't seen hardly any of them.
Yeah.
So I found that invigorating to watch. So
I would like to do when we start the Patreon, I would like to do side podcast where we review all the In Your Houses, but I don't think they'd be to do them as a normal review. Like some of the shows are just so not well known or not that great where I'm not sure if the majority of people would want to listen to. So I don't think we'd do it as a main podcast, maybe just a side podcast where we go from 1 to 20, whatever it is, and review the shows. I think that would be really cool because I personally, even though a lot of them were bad, I found them charming because I used to have the VHSs when I was a kid, and I thought the artwork always really stood out, and I just love the idea of In Your House. So I'm a big In Your House mark, even though they weren't great, and I know they weren't great. But I also just love that era, that mid-90s when it wasn't very good for some reason, still just has a charming effect on me.
It doesn't matter if they're not any good. There's always going to be something to say about them,
yes,
good or bad. So I think that's actually not a bad idea at all.
100%.
We Are All Savages asks, who was the greatest enhancement talent of all time?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, the first person that comes to my head when you ask that question is Barry Horowitz. I don't know if he was the greatest enhancement talent of all time, but just maybe the most well known because he seemed like he strictly was a enhancement talent. Whereas a while back we saw Mordecai squash Scotty 2 Hotty, and Scotty did become an enhancement talent for the WWE for years, but he did also have sort of a career before that where he was considered a big star and was tag team champion and everything else. So best enhancement talent, I'm just going to say the Hardy Boys back when, like in 1996, when they were super young still. Because they could take a beating, couldn't they? Right? So I'll go with the Hardy Boys from back then.
Speaking of Hardy Boys, Shaker Omega asks, and let's not answer this, and you'll see why. Who are on your Mount Rushmore for tag teams? Because I think we could get a good top 5 out of that.
No, we should do it now. It's different to a top 5. Okay. Yeah, they've asked the question. We asked for questions. We can't then be like, we're not going to answer it. So I feel like we should do it.
But a Mount Rushmore is 4. We only need 1 more to get a top 5 out of it.
We'll just do it when people have forgotten.
All right, we'll do it.
Mount Rushmore of tag teams. Great question. I'd have to think about it for a long time, so maybe it is better for a top 5. But off the top of my head, I'm just going to give you what I've got. I would say the Road Warriors, just because we've spoken before on the podcast about just their influence on the business. I feel like I've got to say the Road Warriors, Legion of Doom. I will say the Rock and Roll Express, just because they kind of defined tag team wrestling in that more fast-paced style, and they had such a big influence again on tag team wrestling. Can't really say the Rock and Roll Express without the Midnight Express, and again, the way they kind of brought tag team wrestling up to kind of new heights into like these were main event programs. Do you know what I mean? You hardly ever see that where the tag team division is the main event. And the Midnight Express, they came up with all these different moves that we still see to this day, and just very innovative and kind of picked up the style for tag team wrestling that both those tag teams did. So I'd say them two as well. And then I guess the 4th spot for me personally is the toss up between the Hart Foundation, the British Bulldogs, and the Rockers. I'm actually going to say, just me personally, my favorite, even though I love the Bulldogs and obviously love Brett and Neidhart, I love the Rockers, and I thought the Rockers were just an awesome tag team. And they never had bad matches, no matter who they wrestled. Even if they were wrestling big guys like Powers of Pain or Akeem and the Boss Man, they still had awesome matches. So I'm going to say the Rockers. But there's so many tag teams that I've left out, and this whole thing is kind of subjective. What about you, Sam?
We should probably move on because I'm going to get really annoying about this. But would you call the Shield a tag team? They're not really stable. They're just like a 3-man tag team. Would you say?
I guess, but because of that, I wouldn't put them in a Mount Rushmore. Okay. They don't really define tag team wrestling if you can't even work out if they're a tag team or not.
That's fair enough. I really enjoy them. I really like the Usos. Who else? Hardy Boys. For sure, the Hardy Boys would be on there for me. I really want to think about this because more keep coming into my head. I really like the Brothers of Destruction. Were they a tag team? Kind of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
You would give that? Okay.
I think you're forgetting Head Cheese for a start.
Oh man, thank you. I got my Gold Dust quotes are out of the way already in the top 5. There's Steve Blackman. I just need to squeeze IRS in his summer and we'll be done for another episode.
Money Inc.
Money Inc. There we go. Yeah, that's so fun. Oh, dearie me. Okay. An Elite Lady 55 asks, do you miss living in the UK?
Quick answer, no, not really, but that doesn't mean I don't miss the UK.
Right.
Obviously, there's a lot of things from the UK that I love, and I do love the UK, but do I miss living there? Not really, just because of it's the weather. Honestly,
Yeah.
the weather to me is just so depressing, and being dark and wet and grey the majority of the time, it actually affects me a lot. Like, I'm pretty positive I suffer from what's it called? The seasonal depression.
Something depression. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely feel that every time it would get close to winter when I lived in the UK. I mean, I still even feel it a bit now, but in the UK, especially, I would feel so down and depressed. And I just always felt like I need to be in the sun. I need at least nice weather. And when the UK is hot, for example, London, when it's hot, is probably the best city in the whole entire world. It's just unfortunate that it's only hot for maybe 3 weeks of the year. So.
And the flip side to that, though, is in the UK, when it's hot, like in those 2 weeks of summer that we get and it's hot, we don't have the AC. We don't have that style of air conditioning. So you just don't have a choice. You can try and open a window, but you cannot sleep during those 2 weeks. It's too hot.
That's true.
So we complain when it's too hot. We complain when it's cold, whatever. You can't win.
You can't
but
win.
Yeah, I feel like the weather alone is enough to say overall, honestly, no, I don't.
Right. But it doesn't mean I don't miss the UK, but
No.
I don't necessarily miss living there.
Same. Here we go. Even Flow 69. I love it when their username's taken, they need to come up with a number at the end. They do genuinely go for 69. Which was worse to watch in 1995, WCW or WWF?
Oh boy.
You can't pick both. No,
and honest, yeah. I mean, like I said before, they weren't great years for either company or for wrestling as a whole, but I still enjoy watching that era, even though I know it's not very good. I would say I'd probably give the thumbs up more to the WWF because they still had Brett and Sean and just a click, Razor Ramon, 1-2-3 Kid. So I would probably give the nod to the WWF. And this is WCW 95. This is still before they got all like the cruiserweights and stuff. So yeah, WWF for me.
I think so. Yeah, I think WWF. Rach YSM25 asks, what's your favorite pay-per-view from 2000? Not the 2000s.
Okay, the year 2000.
This is a very specific question. Please, may I go first?
Well, we know what your answer is, but go on.
Royal Rumble. It's my favorite pay-per-view of all time. Is Royal Rumble 2000. Marty?
Well, it's funny because that pay-per-view definitely sticks out just because that was a really big deal when that happened, because it was going back to the UK, that was shown on terrestrial TV, Channel 4. So it seemed like everyone in school watched Royal Rumble 2000. And of course, it had that classic match with Triple H and Cactus Jack. Going back and watching it, I don't think it's the best one. I think the best one was Backlash. It was after WrestleMania Backlash 2000, which was headlined by The Rock and Triple H. I think that's when Austin came back or had made an appearance. It's got Jericho versus Benoit for the IC title. It has that classic Dean Malenko versus Scotty 2 Hotty match where the finish is the DDT off the top, which everyone remembers. And I think it also had randomly Eddie Guerrero versus S.A. Rios, and just didn't really get those sort of matches in the WWF at the time. So Backlash stood out to me as probably the best pay-per-view of 2000. But I can't remember them all now. They all kind of blur together. But that one, and this, I'm pretty sure it's 2000. The set was really cool for Backlash 2000 as well. So that sticks out in my head.
I really want to cover Royal Rumble 2000, WrestleMania 2000, and Backlash 2000.
Oh, we should, yeah.
We definitely do.
We'll do a trilogy, yeah.
Fox Swit, again, asks to both of us, who's your favorite hardcore champion?
Oh, Crash Holly for sure.
Crash Holly, yep.
Absolutely. Well, you could say Steve Blackman as well, but no, I loved Crash Holly, and I think he's a really underrated talent, and he doesn't really get spoken about in this day and age, and I don't know if he really gets his flowers, and probably because he passed away quite young,
Yeah.
and I guess his run in the WWE wasn't that long, but I was always just a massive fan of Crash Holly, and he made the absolute most out of that hardcore title and made it into something pretty special.
100% agree. When I think of hardcore champion, I think of shenanigans. I don't think of violence. I think of shenanigans and horseplay. We just mentioned WrestleMania 2000, the Battle Royal, the Hardcore Battle Royal. These things stick in my mind, and you can't have any of that without just immediately going towards your brain going towards Crash Holly. He just made it.
Yeah.
And the 24, what was it called?
24/7 rule. That's obviously
24/7 rule. Yeah. And he just took that and he ran with it, and he carried it, literally ran with it through airport security, through whatever, a kid's ball pit, I think, at one point. Just so many memorable moments to the hardcore championship, like we owe to Crash Holly, who was absolutely awesome. So 100% Crash Holly.
Yeah, I mean, you could make an argument for Rob Van Dam just because he kind of elevated the title somewhat.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, you can make an argument for a bunch of different people. Obviously, well, Mankind was the first champion, but he didn't really do anything with it. But I think when someone says hardcore championship, I instantly think of Crash Holly. So that's got to be my answer.
Rach, same person, asks, thoughts on the trend of announcing nearly all participants of a Royal Rumble? How'd you feel about that?
I didn't really realize that they did that. I mean, they always kind of did that back in the early days, I thought, like when the Rumble started. I remember those videos of the wrestlers kind of saying they were going to win the Rumble. So I don't really, as long as they don't announce everyone, obviously the excitement of the Rumble is seeing
the wild card. Yes.
Yeah. Seeing the surprises or people that you don't expect to be in there or the cameos. To be honest with you, those Rumbles, they need that. If they don't have that, typically any Rumble that people have said that was a really bad Rumble, it's because they haven't had a cameo or a return or someone that the fans weren't expecting. So I feel like it's kind of weird because by me saying you need a surprise in every single one kind of makes it not a surprise, but I do think you need that in the Rumble because typically the whole match is you're kind of just waiting to see the next person to come out is. Do you know what I mean? So the action in the ring is kind of like whatever. It's just you want to see who comes out and who's going to interact with who. And the Rumbles, if booked correctly, can be incredible. But if they're not so booked well, then they can be a bit boring. But yeah, as long as they leave like at the very least, let's say 5 names unannounced, I think that's okay.
Yeah, I didn't actually notice this as a trend. I'm kind of with you on this. I feel like it's kind of always been a thing. Perhaps maybe I'm wrong on that. But absolutely, you still need, I don't mind knowing some entrants, especially when that's required for a storyline purpose.
Right.
If people are going to meet each other in the Royal Rumble and they have something existing, sometimes you need to know who's in it.
Sure.
But there definitely needs to be room for the random element, the wild card, the celebrity guests, or whatever's going to happen. The returning wrestler, who you haven't seen for a couple of years, someone making a comeback.
Well,
we need that.
I think, was it not last year that they like announced that Cody's, or this year, I guess it would have been, they announced that Cody's return was happening in the Rumble. And there was kind of a big debate on whether they should have announced it or had it as a surprise.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, actually. So he obviously he debuted at WrestleMania. Then not long after that, before that Hell in a Cell match with Seth, he tore his pec, I want to say. He did the Hell in a Cell match where all his arm and chest was all bloodied and purple. And then he had to take something like 8 months off. And then they announced with vignettes on Raw, I want to say, that Cody Rhodes was returning for the Royal Rumble. And a lot of people were upset saying it should have been a surprise. But I'm kind of indifferent to that. I was kind of like, well, he's already done the whole turn up as a surprise thing with his debut. So this is just a different way of doing it, I thought. And I think that probably announcing Cody for the Rumble obviously got people excited for the Rumble and wanting to watch it. So I can see both sides.
I'm going to move to the mailbag. Some of these are longer because there's no word limit. So some of these might be quite wordy. Savannah asks, hi, Marty. I'm going to edit this and say, and Sam. It wasn't in there. This is Y2 Garcia from Instagram.
Oh, yes. Awesome.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, huge fan. Always. You met her when you went to El Paso, right?
Yes.
Big fan of the show, which we love. We love that. Thank you very much. I know this is supposed to be for fun, and I promise I'm not trying to kill the mood or anything. That's my job. Don't worry, I've got that aspect covered. I just wanted to ask how you personally stay motivated, especially when you're experiencing a low moment in life and things don't feel like they're going to get better. I have been personally struggling with these low moments more often than not, and it's been rough lately to say the least. I will say that listening to the pod has helped for sure. That's good. That's awesome. It has kept my mind off everything, and I enjoy listening to the episodes whenever I just need to not think about what's going on in life. I can't thank you enough for keeping me going by simply just doing a podcast that's super fun to listen to. I hope you know how much it means to me that you've been so helpful in my life. That's lovely. I hope you have a great day, and thanks again for being such a help to me. Nothing but love. P.S. I hope you'll come back to El Paso one of these days. I miss your hugs and your warm and welcoming personality.
Oh wow! I think I'm gonna.
That's lovely, isn't it?
I think I'm gonna cry. Well, Savannah, first of all, I mean, thank you for your email, and I'm really sorry to hear that you're down or that you're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, like I completely understand, and I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast can probably understand how to stay motivated. Well, truth is, how do I put this? I'm not always motivated. I'm really not, and no one that I know stays 100% all of the time motivated. Do you know what I mean? So it's completely normal to have these down periods and everything else. I love the fact that you listen to the show and you say that it helps you get through things. That actually that does make me want to cry. That's just so awesome to hear. And in terms of how to get through the down times, the down periods, like I said, I've been there, and especially within the last few years or so. I think the thing that gets me through it all is I do have a good support system. I have a really good, great group of friends. I have my family, everything else. And I think a big part of it all is talking about it. And I always feel so much better when I talk to someone about my problems, someone that I trust, someone that I love, whatever it might be. And again, it kind of sounds cliche, but always just feel better for speaking about it. Like, try not to hold all that stuff inside and just dwell and dwell and dwell. Another one of the things that I've said quite a lot on social media recently, and I find that helps me, and this might kind of sound a little bit lame, but whatever, I'm going to say it. I always say create, don't hate. So if I'm feeling down, like, this is why doing this podcast for me is really important, because before this, I definitely felt like I was in a slump and I wasn't really getting the chance to express my creativity. And that's probably the thing that I enjoy most in life is being creative. So, and I wasn't doing anything, and that was on me. Do you know what I mean? And in my head, I thought I was justifying it by being like, oh, I've been browbeaten and I'm just like, things aren't fair. And it's like, at the end of the day, no one's going to do things for you. Do you know what I mean? It's like, no, I need to pull my thumb out of my ass and I need to get up and I need to start doing something. And then I start creating stuff and I hear stories like yourself. And then that really uplifts me. That really makes me think, okay, this is worthwhile. And that brings me joy. I do think that as well. Like, I do believe in karma to a degree. And I think if you help people, you're gonna feel good from it, and people in return are gonna help you, and the good karma will come from doing that. So yeah, I guess the point that I'm trying to get at, I think, make sure that you're being productive, make sure that you're being proactive, make sure you're doing stuff that you enjoy. I've always been one that I personally can't do a job that I hate, and I know everyone has different circumstances, but for me personally, I'm like, I'd rather be broke than do a job that I hate. Like, I need to do stuff that I enjoy. Like this podcast, we're obviously not, as of yet, getting rich from it, but that's not important. What's important is that I enjoy it and it's a great creative outlet for me. So I would say that follow your passion, whatever it is. You know, I've seen you at wrestling shows, and I think that's awesome that you go to them and talking to people, talking to loved ones. And yeah, I think another big one, again, these all sound cliche, but they're right. Like practicing gratitude, I think is a really big part of it. I typically every day, normally in the mornings or sometimes at night, I try to practice gratitude and what I'm grateful for. And it's easy, especially now with social media, it's so easy to play the comparison game. And what do they say? Comparison is the thief of all happiness. Is that right? Um, and you see people on their social media and they seem to be having the best time ever, or they have the coolest watch or the nicest shoes, and they're going on vacations and everything else. And what you need to remember is like, don't compare your real life to someone's fake life. Do you know what I mean? Like people aren't putting all their real moments on social media. If they're not feeling good, typically they're not putting that on social media. They're showing you like the best stuff, the highlights, like the 10% of the best part of their lives. They're putting that on social media. I do think that's an easy trap to fall into. And I've always tried really hard not to compare myself to others. Like, what's the line? Like, you're only in a race with yourself. And yeah, sometimes it is tricky with me, especially like last few years where I see, oh, this person's doing this person's doing that. I would like to do that as well. And but then I need to remember, okay, like I just need to see, am I doing better than yesterday? Am I doing better than last year? So again, I'm really sorry that you're feeling down, but I think if you could put those things into practice, talking to people, practicing gratitude, I would say try to limit your social media would probably be a big help as well. And just find what you love and go for it. That's all I can say. Like, just go for it. Like, life's too short to not follow your passion. So, I don't know what your passion is, but whatever it is, and hopefully you know, but if you don't, find it, experiment and find it, and just follow that. And I'm positive it will bring you some happiness.
Sort of related, more serious. Joel asks, were you surprised to be named in the Speaking Out movement?
uh Short answer, yes, I was. Mainly because like the interaction wasn't exactly a secret. Like the story had been acknowledged sort of publicly in the past. I want to say 2 years before speaking out, and maybe 3 years after the interaction. I think someone put an allegation out on social media, and it was immediately shut down by the woman involved. And obviously, it's a very public manner being on Twitter, and she just stated completely, like she said, "Stay out of my business," and this was 100% consensual, right? Like she put that out there for the world. Obviously, this gets overlooked, but you know, she said that a few years sort of prior to speaking out. So to a few years later to see her sort of contradicting the events with a story that didn't align with what actually happened was obviously shocking and surprising. But
Mm.
I could go all into this, but maybe we'll save that for another day and another episode. Obviously, it's kind of a sensitive subject and kind of difficult to talk about. But to answer your question in short, like, yes, I was surprised because it'd already been sort of, what's the word? I guess denied previously.
Kate asks, hey, Marty and Sam. First off, just want to ask how you guys are and say thanks for the awesome podcast. Thank you for listening. I love that you go against the grain and aren't afraid to voice the sometimes unpopular opinions. Umbrella emoji, of course.
Nice.
My first question is to Marty. All right, I'll just sit out then, shall I, Kate? If you were head booker at AEW, what matches would you set up for your dream pay-per-view with their current roster? Okay, and then the same question for WWE. This has got a second question. We'll do this half first.
Oh God. I'd have to think about that long and hard. I think it would be great to really invest in the younger talent and start to create stars. And I see Swerve Strickland is getting really over right now.
Yeah.
So I think I would run with that. You know, I would run with, I mean, he's kind of playing a heel right now. I think I would sort of push him towards babyface, and I would try and build like a strong heel champion. MJF right now is a babyface champion. I think even though he's still entertaining, I personally think he's stronger as a heel. So I would probably turn MJF back heel and then do a long program of Swerve chasing MJF. And I just think that would be really cool to have a big pay-per-view where it's headlined by two homegrown stars, like not XWE guys or anything else. And you've built MJF, you've built Strickland, and he did that promo where he said he wanted to be the first Black World champion. And I think that's a great story. He wants to make history. And right now he's on fire. So I would build for a long time MJF versus Swerve Strickland, and at the big dream pay-per-view, I'd finally have Swerve Strickland win the gold and become champion. I think that would be, you know, some really good business. And there's other guys as well. I think I would push both Phoenix and Pentagon as single stars and really push them into the main event. I think that could be, you know, really good. There's a lot of things, but mainly it would be kind of pushing the younger talent, start to really make stars. Do you know what I mean? I mean, they could argue that they've made some already, and I guess they have with MJF and to a degree Darby Allin and a few others. But to me, I think it's, you know, they've been around 5 years now, and they've really, to stand out from WWE, they really need to push their younger guys, or not necessarily push them, but establish them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Swerve Strickland. He's on fire. He's awesome. Second question for both of you. And then in brackets, and this is really funny, but I feel like I'm asking questions on blind date. This is a question for contestant number 2. And why that's funny is because before this podcast, for some reason, I was making a cup of tea and I got in my head Cilla Black. I was thinking surprise. And then like we get to the mailbag and there's someone's bringing up blind date. It's just really weird that happened. But anyway, I digress. If you weren't hugely successful, I'm going at this, and handsome podcast hosts and Marty a wrestler, what would you guys be doing instead? And do you think would be living in America? Thanks again, and can't wait to hear the episode on Monday. Smiley face emoji and a Christmas tree emoji, and we love Christmas. So thank you, Kate.
Oh, that's very nice. I'll be honest, like from a very young age, I had a fascination with America and the United States. I think the TV shows I watched were all from America, whether it was Power Rangers or Simpsons, South Park, whatever it might be, all seemed to be from America. The music I listened to seemed to be from America. And obviously the wrestling that I watched typically was from America. So I always had a big fascination with America, and I always felt like I needed to grow up, and my dream was to move to America. My dream really as a youngster was just to go to America. So but the ultimate dream was to move to America. So yeah, I feel like I would have found out if it wasn't the road that I took with wrestling, I feel like I would have found another way to do it. In terms of what I would do, it's tricky. I spoke earlier. I find it hard to work for somebody else, so it'd probably have to be running a business. But I think just doing something creative, maybe video editing, maybe I'd be more into that if I wasn't, you know, so busy with wrestling and the podcast. It's still something I'd like to really master now, but maybe I'd do something like that. I did a media degree, so maybe if I wasn't wrestling, I would have followed that path. Maybe I would have worked in Hollywood, but maybe behind the camera. That could have been cool. So, but yeah, that's a difficult one to answer.
You seem like you're the type of person who gravitates towards a creative path, but one that you can't like really master. One of those ones that like you can always be getting better. Like not just like go in, master it, and then just do it day to day like it's rote. It seems like you always want to learn and create at the same time, kind of guy.
Right, and that's the cool thing with wrestling is like no matter how good you get, you could always get better. Do you know what I mean? There's always room to get better. It's not like you get to a level and it's like, nope, can't get any better than this. That's not the case. So
no, that's and wrestling is another example of that, which is why I brought it up. Yeah.
Always learning.
Yeah, it's funny you're talking about growing up in the UK and the media that you consume is from the US and it paints this picture. So I always used to watch King of the Hill and I really wanted to move to Texas. Then I moved to Texas. But what's really funny is then moving to Florida. You know Miami Vice? I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Of course.
Okay. You know how cool it was in Miami Vice when they're just driving through Miami at night? Yeah. Have you ever tried to drive through Miami at night? It's a nightmare. Dude, it's like the uncoolest thing you could possibly do.
Dude, I remember walking really late at night in South Beach of Miami, and it was something like 2 a.m. and I saw walking like towards me, he was actually going to walk past me, but this big jacked dude with tattoos around his face carrying over his shoulder a sledgehammer, right? And legit, I like without cursing, like crapped myself. I was like, oh my God, like he was walking the streets with a sledgehammer. And then when he just passed me and I was like, oh, thank, like I was like, what a relief. Because I thought, who is this maniac walking around with a sledgehammer? But when I turned around and looked on the back of his t-shirt, it said like, it was like he was like a personal trainer or something. So the sledgehammer was to hit the tires with, if that makes sense. So it wasn't just like he was walking around carrying a sledgehammer. So it's like, oh, it makes sense. But just to see that visual, super duper scary.
I remember when you messaged me that when it happened, but you never told me the explanation. So
did I not?
No, you didn't. You just told me about the guy with the sledgehammer. This whole time until now, I'd always thought it was just a guy with a sledgehammer.
Right, because at first I thought like maybe someone might need to notify the police if there's a guy walking around with a sledgehammer, but it kind of made sense when I saw the personal training thing. I was like, oh, they're probably hitting tires. He's just moving it from place to place, I guess.
We hope. Otherwise, his shirt's just like the perfect cover.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. True.
But just why I'm bringing this up is we complain a lot about things that happen as consumer advocacy barbarians about living in the US, but just the expectation of living in America from the UK compared to the reality is it's not frustrating. It's often just hilarious. I was like, oh yeah, driving through Miami at night, I'll be the coolest guy in the world. And then driving through Miami at night, you're like, get me out of here.
Do we have like loads of questions?
Oh man, we've got millions, and they're all. I'm scrolling through. They're pretty good. Like they're all really good. We should probably answer them.
Okay, let's do this then. Let's just do 2 more questions now, and then we'll make them quick. But then we'll do a part 2. How's that? A part 2 of Q&A. Because the people made the effort to ask the questions, so I really would like to answer as many as possible. So let's do that. So listen, guys, if your question does not get read on this week's episode, tune in to part 2 and we'll be sure to answer your question. Sorry, it's because Sam asked me a question and I just ramble off and go on one. So my bad.
This question is really good, but it's kind of visual, and I don't know how we could answer this very well, but let's just give it our best shot. Brando Cash asks, how would you design your perfect world title? Because I know you are all in on your like belt designs.
Yeah, great question. I am a sucker, obviously, for the more traditional wrestling belts. I would like them to kind of be classic looking and more sort of prestigious and, you know, does that make sense? Rather than now with the, like, especially the WWE ones are more, they have the big logo, but it's very kind of modernized and kind of, it's kind of far from what the belts originally were.
They're very angular as well.
Right. I feel like they kind of need to be somewhat round. I did actually design I got a new Ring of Honor belt designed that never ended up happening for Ring of Honor. And that championship belt, it was a red strap and it was gold belt and it was really kind of old school looking and I loved that design. But my favorite belts, like just off the top of my head, the NWA title I love, the original Intercontinental title I love. So anything kind of more traditional looking, I would say, to make my favorite belt.
I really like belts that take the theme of whatever they're the title of and running with them. So however, so if you think of the Hardcore Championship belt from WWE, what that looked like, but no, this is the thing. Its heart was in the right place, but just like it was too obnoxious.
Yes.
So I would like to create a belt that's kind of the perfect in between. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I would do it, but one that like takes the elements of whatever it's supposed to represent, but in a less ostentatious or obnoxious way. Just like maybe with some subtleties that if people are really examining the belt, they can see the references and stuff. I don't know how I would do it, but I'd love to see a belt like that.
Yeah, absolutely with you.
And this final question is a callback kind of to our top 5. Madison J asks, with no hindsight, which is easier said to do than, we'll try, were the Radicalz main event ready in WCW prior to them leaving the company?
Certainly in ring, they were all phenomenal, but were they ready for the WWE main event? Probably not quite yet, because they needed to come in and they needed to, the audience with those guys, they needed to watch them grow. Do you know what I mean? They needed to be along for the ride with those talents. And they didn't come in straight away main eventers. Benoit more so, but Eddie, he kind of came in at the mid card and then you watched his kind of rise, and it took him some time, and that was all part of his story. So like bell to bell, I'd say yes, but the character wise and getting used to the WWE style and fitting in with WWE, I think it went the way that it kind of should have. So yeah, and obviously Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko never became main eventers in WWE, but no, I think and that's funny. You hear a lot of times people say like, "Oh, WCW held these talents down," but a lot of the times when people say that, it's like, yeah, but those talents, they weren't what they, back then they weren't what they end up becoming. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's probably too hard to really say like, what does main event ready really mean in a completely different organization as well?
Mm-hmm.
But it's difficult. It is really tough.
Well, you think about it as well, like Jericho, for example, he kind of had a main event run in 2001 when he won his undisputed world title, the first one, and his run was okay, but then he didn't have like a really amazing run till, was it years later? Maybe like, was it 2008, 9, when he did that feud with Shawn Michaels, and he like really, really stepped up, and it was, it takes time. Do you know what I mean? And you think, oh, we love Jericho, but it's like, oh, we can actually get better and better. So yeah, I definitely.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point. It's like, do they really need to be main event ready before they come over? If we want to see someone grow if we want to watch them grow as well, that's a good point.
Well, and they were in the mid card at the WCW, so they couldn't really bring them in at the main event because it just looks odd that way, I guess.
So I guess the answer is no. However, we're very glad that it happened, right? Very glad indeed. All right, guys. Thank you so much for the questions. Again, we've got so many and we really want to read them out, but that's perfect that we can just another Q&A episode. If you want to hear one, let us know and we can hit the ground running with plenty of questions in the chamber.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're not following us already on the social media platforms, on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at The Villain Pod, give us a like, a subscribe, a follow, whatever it might be. And thank you so much again for all your lovely questions.
Yep. Thank you so much for everyone who contributed as well as listened or watched, downloaded, whatever you do. We really appreciate it. We say that all the time, but we really do. There's the motivation for us as well, is getting feedback like this and questions and people interacting. It's a really wonderful feeling. So thanks, everybody. But until then, have a good week. Till next week.